Good evening everyone. Welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 19th August 2025 and today we have some very important topics for the discussion. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics in a very detailed and in-depth manner. And the first topic is about the Trump-Putin summit which took place in Alaska and what will be the implications of this summit on India. Because we all knew that US President Donald Trump already imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods exported to US. So therefore, in fact, US is one of the largest trading partner for India, right? So if I'm not wrong, US is the second largest trading partner for India, and in fact India is also enjoying the trade surplus with US. So therefore increasing tariffs on Indian goods will severely hit the trade surplus of India that we have been enjoying with US. So therefore India has been looking for a positive outcome from this Alaska summit, right? So if there is a positive outcome from the summit, there is a possibility that US President Donald Trump will gradually decrease these tariffs on Indian goods, and that will further help increase the bilateral trade between India and US. So therefore India has been keenly watching the outcome or the Alaska summit and its overall outcome, right? So in fact, if we talk about the context of this particular article, and in fact this article has been given in the Hindu, and in fact this could be very important for gender studies paper 2. Now what is the context? Now we all knew, because we have already discussed about this Alaska summit which is going to take place between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. So therefore India has been keenly watching this summit, right? Because already sanctions have been imposed on Indian goods. There might be a possibility that if there is a positive outcome from the summit, so that will give relief to India in terms of sanctions which are imposed on Indian goods exported to US, right? So let's understand what are the key tenets of this Alaska summit and what are India's hopes and US responses from this particular summit. Now in fact, India has been expecting, in fact India is positive about both Russia and US reaching an agreement, because US very often imposing pressure on India to stop buying Russian oil. Russian oil is very important for India in terms of its energy security. India needs to ensure energy security. Now understand that energy markets are mostly concentrated in Middle East, and some European Union countries have stopped buying Russian oil, and they are now in the West Asian oil markets. So therefore there is a high possibility of increasing oil prices, and increased oil prices India cannot afford, because now India is the third largest consumer of oil, right? We don't have the domestic supply of oil as well. 85% of the oil we have been importing from other countries. So therefore it is very important for India to import the crude oil from Russia, right? So at a lesser prices, because that can ensure energy security for India. So therefore India has been expecting a rapprochement from both US and Russia, so that US will not increase pressure on India that India should stop buying Russian oil, right? Secondly, we all knew that US President Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs initially on Indian goods which are exported to US. So the reason that he was given for increasing tariffs on Indian goods was because India has been importing Russian oil, and India has been fueling Russian war machine by financing through purchasing Russian oil. Now in fact, even after 25% of tariffs, India continued to import Russian oil. So what US President Donald Trump did, so he imposed additional 25% tariffs on Indian exports to US. Right? So therefore overall the tariffs become 50%, and 50% tariff on Indian goods is a huge, particularly with a country like US where we have been enjoying a trade surplus. Now, what is a trade surplus here? So, if I say trade surplus, so trade surplus is we have been exporting more rather than what we have been importing. So more exports than importing goods from Russia. US, right? So that in that particular situation we enjoy trade surplus, but with countries like China we have trade deficit. Now what is trade deficit? So we have been importing more goods rather than what we export, so which is called as trade deficit. So I hope you have understood the difference between trade surplus and trade deficit. With US we have been enjoying trade surplus, and with China we have the trade deficit. And in fact, during Operation Sindoor that was launched on May 7th this year. Now in fact, US President Donald Trump very often claimed that he mediated between India and Pakistan to stop this war like a situation. But India don't accept this claim from US President Donald Trump, right? So India don't like such a narrative that US President mediated between India and Pakistan. So India very often rejected this claim, this narrative of US President Donald Trump. So therefore, this is also another major factor that has antagonized US President Donald Trump. He is looking for a Nobel Peace Prize, and that is also another factor which resulted in imposing 50% tariffs on Indian goods. Now, what are some structural lessons that India could learn in its foreign policy from this? Now, in fact, India has been excessively dependent on a leader level diplomacy, right? So this is also called as over reliance on leader level diplomacy. However, this excessive reliance on leader level diplomacy has given rise to a limited strategic gains, right? So we have a limited strategic gains from this over reliance on leader level diplomacy, because as seen in the contrast between high profile summits and unresolved disputes with both US and China. And in fact, the decision making, if you look at US, the decision making on the part of US President Donald Trump, so it's highly personalized, right? So he himself taking such a key decisions, and there are a less number of channels which are available for India to negotiate effectively with US, right? So whenever decisions are taken at the personal level, it will be little bit of difficulty for India to negotiate effectively on the personalized decisions, which are, for example, 24% tariffs and additional 25% tariffs, and such decisions. If there are less institutional channels, it will be very difficult to negotiate. So this could be another major problem. And apart from that, there is an absence of US envoy with deep knowledge of India. So this also further complicates the navigation through the turbulent phases of the bilateral relationship, right? So these are three structural lessons that we could actually learn in our foreign policy. Now in fact, when we talk about India's engagement with US, so it should not be about the leader-centric foreign policy. Rather, it should be a multi-dimensional foreign policy, a multi-dimensional engagement with the US, and that is important to achieve the strategic gains. Secondly, US President Donald Trump has been taking decisions at his personal level. So therefore, there is a need for institutional channels so that we can actually negotiate with the US on important aspects such as tariffs, trade, defense deals, etc. And in fact, on the part of the US, there is an absence of a senior US envoy to India who is having a complete knowledge of India. So if he is having a complete knowledge of India, so that will also help us navigate India-US relations during the turbulent times, right? So these are three difficult scenarios where the possibility of improving India-US relations would be further complicated. So let's understand the strategic course correction for India as well in this key context. Now, in fact, in this context, India must reclaim a bipartisan credibility in the US by balancing Republicans and Democrats. And in fact, India should also avoid over association with one political faction. Now, we all knew that in US there is only one there are two political factions, Republicans and Democrats, and now the current US President Donald Trump belonged to the Republicans. So earlier it was appeared that India was heavily biased towards the Republicans, neglecting the Democrats. Rather, India should reclaim the bipartisan credibility. So that means India should support both Democrats and Republicans as well, and India should avoid its over association with one political faction. For example, India is excessively biased towards the Republicans, that political party Donald Trump belonged to. And in fact, so India's past acceptance of unilateral US sanctions, for example, with respect to Iran. Now, US asked India to stop purchasing Iranian oil, and India did that, and Venezuela also. So in fact, when India followed the sanctions that US has imposed in the past, so further weakened its principles. For example, when US imposed sanctions on purchasing Iranian oil, China continues to purchase Iranian oil, but India stopped purchasing Iranian oil. So therefore, when India stopped, it has weakened its principles. So thereby, India lacked power to resist such pressures. Right? So therefore, if India have such a power to resist sanctions imposed by US, will further enhance or strengthen India's overall credibility in the global south. So that is very important, because when you have aspirations to become a global power, when you have aspirations to become the leader of the global south, it is very important that you maintain a foreign policy which respects your strategic autonomy. And it is also very important to resist pressures, so that you can be independent, you can be self-reliant, and you can portray yourself as a leader in the eyes of other countries in the global south and rest of the world. Right? So when India followed the sanctions imposed by US in the past, so that has sent a wrong message, and that has weakened its principles as well. So therefore, in this context, India should explore the reciprocal and calibrated response to US tariff barriers. Right? So we all knew that US has imposed 50% tariffs on Indian goods. So therefore, we should have a reciprocal and calibrated response to this. And apart from that, the remittance taxes and trade restrictions, so that India can actually safeguard its strategic and economic interests, which are paramount to us. Right? So I hope you have understood this topic. So let's move on to the next important topic, which is Jan Vishwas Bill of 2.0. Now let's understand what exactly is a Jan Vishwas Bill of 2.0. Now, what is the context? So the context is that recently the Jan Vishwas Amendment Bill 2025, so that will be introduced in the Lok Sabha by Union Minister Piyush Goyal. Now, in fact, this Jan Vishwas Bill actually aimed at to decriminalize minor offences, and it also aimed at amending around 350 provisions and promote ease of living and business through the trust-based governance. And in fact, there are number of laws which are obsolete, which are old, which are anachronistic. So therefore, it is very important to repeal those provisions or laws or bring amendments to the existing laws through Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 to promote ease of living and business through a trust-based governance. So that is the overall objective of this Jan Vishwas Amendment Bill of 2025 that Union Minister Piyush Goyal introduced in the Lok Sabha. So let's understand the key highlights of the Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 very briefly. Now, in fact, this bill has been introduced by Union Minister in Lok Sabha. We all knew about that. And apart from that, this Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 also aimed to amend several enactments and also aimed at decriminalizing the minor provisions or minor offenses. And in fact, so around 350 provisions are proposed for amendment in different laws which are existing in India. And in fact, the Jan Vishwas Bill of 2.0 is also part of government's larger drive to reform and also improve India's business climate by removing or amending the existing provisions which are old, anachronistic, which may not be suitable for the modern society needs. And this Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 is actually built on Jan Vishwas Act of 2023. And Jan Vishwas Act of 2023 already decriminalized 183 provisions in 42 central acts. Now, what is the significance of this Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 for the governance and economy? So we should also understand this aspect as well. Now, in fact, it is being said that the Jan Vishwas Bill 2.0 will reduce the regulatory burden for individuals and the businesses as well. And if it reduces the regulatory burden, so it improves the ease of doing business in India, and it would also attract investments into India. So therefore, it will also give a sustained push for employment creation. And in fact, it also encourages investment friendly climate in India. It promotes ease of living by eliminating harsh penalties for the minor offenses which are committed, because these penalties will be repealed as part of the Jan Vishwas Bill of 2.0. And in fact, in India, there will be a legal certainty, and legal certainty is good because it improves the confidence and it also improves the ease of business in India. And apart from that, it also signals a shift towards modern and citizen-centric governance in India. So therefore, this is the advantage or the benefits of Jan Vishwas Bill of 2.0. So let's understand the Jan Vishwas Act and legal reform measures that needs to be taken in this regard. So the Jan Vishwas Act of 2023, so it has removed imprisonment, fines in many laws, converting some into the minority, so the monetary penalties as well. Now, what is the objective? The objective is to reduce the criminal liability for trivial offenses, and it will also promote ease of doing business in India. So if we talk about the legal reforms that sought to brought in through the Jan Vishwas Act of 2020 2.0, so over 40,000 compliances abolished and 1500 absolute or obsolete or old laws will be scrapped by this. And in fact, so if we talk about Prime Minister's vision, eliminating the outdated laws which are unnecessary and they are criminalizes the citizens as well, right? So in fact, if we talk about the governance approach, so the governance approach, it actually focuses on simplification, rationalization and trust-based governance. That is very important for improving the relations between the citizen and the government, and also improving the ease of doing business as well. So this is actually based on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's vision. And next topic is amoebic meningoencephalitis. So this is also called as a brain-eating amoeba. Now, this brain-eating amoeba is recently in news in the in the state of Kerala, right? So there are some cases of this brain eating amoeba have been reported in the state of Kerala. So let's understand about this. An alert has been issued against amoebic meningoencephalitis in Kozhikode district of Kerala, right? So health department sets up awareness efforts. So this article has been given in the Hindu newspaper. So let's understand what is this amoebic meningoencephalitis and what are the key characteristics of such disease. Now, what is the context? So the context is that the health department in Kerala's Kozhikode has issued an alert against primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, right? Because there are 3 cases which have been reported in the Kozhikode district and a death in recent days as well. Because once a person is infected with amoebic meningoencephalitis, so the mortality rate is very high. So it would be close to 97%. So therefore, if a person is infected with this disease, so the mortality rate is very high. So therefore, we need to increase the awareness efforts so that we can prevent the spread of this disease, right? So what is the causative organism of this amoebic meningoencephalitis? So which is Nilgharia fowleri. So Nilgharia fowleri is the causative organism of this amoebic meningoencephalitis. This Nilgharia fowleri, so which is a free living amoeba, and it is also commonly known as the brain eating amoeba because it primarily affects or infects brain, and because of this reason it is being called as the brain eating amoeba. However, this brain eating amoeba, which is Nilgharia fowleri, thrives in warm freshwater bodies such as lakes, rivers, and in fact some poorly maintained swimming pools as well. So tropical areas are primarily and particularly suitable for the growth of the Nilgharia fowleri, and states like Kerala have already seen cases of this amoebic meningoencephalitis. And in fact, the Nilgharia fowleri is a heat-loving bacteria or amoeba, right? So it is being called as thermophilic. So thermophilic actually called as the heat loving, and it can even survive a temperature up to 46 degrees Celsius. So therefore, tropical areas are more suitable for the growth of Nilgharia fowleri, which causes amoebic meningoencephalitis. And in fact, so if because of the climate change and global warming, so the global temperature increases, so that also increases the growth of Nilgharia fowleri, because Nilgharia fowleri is a thermophilic or heat loving amoeba. However, the Nilgharia fowleri will not survive in salty water or sea water. Rather, it only survive in lakes, rivers, and other not well maintained swimming pools. And it will not survive in chlorinated pools with proper disinfection as well. Now, what is the mode of transmission of this Nilgharia fowleri? And this amoeba infects humans when a contaminated water enters the nasal cavity, typically during swimming, diving, or water sports. And from nasal passages, it then migrates along the olfactory nerve to the brain as well. So it primarily affects the brain, it reaches the brain, and it is not transmitted from person to person. That means it is not a contagious. Rather, it is not a communicable disease. Rather, it infects a person who is either diving, swimming. So it enters the nasal cavity and then olfactory and then to the brain. So therefore it is being called as a brain eating amoeba, right? So this is how the Naegleria fowleri would actually look like, and this is how it actually enters into the navel cavity and olfactory, and then it primarily affects the brain as well, right? So if we talk about some details about this Naegleria fowleri, so it is a very microscopic bacteria, amoeba, sorry. So it is a microscopic amoeba, and in fact this microscopic amoeba lives in warm fresh waters, and it can enter through nose and then through sinus and to the olfactory bulb, and it also reproduces by fission and spreads throughout the brain as well. And in fact this amoeba, it is said that consumes tissue, causes swelling of the brain, and also finally death as well, right? So as I have already told you, the fatality rate is over 97%, with only a handful of survivors who are reported worldwide. So therefore, once it is infected, so there is a high chance that the person would die, right? So only a handful of persons survived this Naegleria fowleri. Now if we talk about it, so once this Naegleria fowleri amoeba is in the brain, so it rapidly destroys the brain tissues, and thereby causing inflammation and swelling in the brain firstly. Secondly, this Naegleria fowleri causes amoebomeningoencephalitis. So this particular disease progresses extremely fast pace. So early flu-like symptoms advance to a neurological dysfunction, coma, and death within days as well. So it is having a high fatality rate. So if we talk about the treatment protocols, there is no universally effective treatment, and most cases remain fatal despite interventions. So the next important topic is the global food security through India. So what is the context? The context is that UN State of Food Security and Nutrition, so recently in its report 2025 highlights India's decisive role in reducing global undernourishment, with national hunger prevalence declining to 12% in 22-24. And this article has been given in the Hindu newspaper, and this could be very important for the General Studies paper 3 and General Studies paper 2 as well. So let's understand about this. So decline in undernourishment. So undernourishment fell globally to 673 million people and 8.2% in 2024. So marking a reversal of the pandemic induced spike. And in fact, India reduced undernourishment from 3% 2020-2022 and 12% in 22-24. So thereby, translating it into 30 million less people facing the problem of hunger. And policy investments in digital governance, including targeted delivery, nutrition sensitive programs, underpinned these improvements as well. And if we talk about transformation of India's food systems, the public distribution system will be as actually modernized, digitization, Aadhaar enabled authentication, real-time tracking, and one nation, one ration card. So all these important interventions are actually brought in, and they have enabled food portability of around 800 million people. Schemes such as PM Poshan and integrated child development services have shifted focus from calorie sufficiency to dietary diversity and child nutrition as well. However, despite achieving such progress, over 60% of Indian people cannot afford a healthy diet due to higher prices of nutrient-dense foods and inadequate cold chains as well. Now, what should be the way ahead, or road ahead for agri-food transformation? Now, expanding production, affordability of pulses, fruits, vegetables, and animal source food. So that will meet the nutrition deficiency, and this is also essential and important for balanced nutrition. And investments in cold chains, digital logistics, supports for the farmer producer organizations, women-led enterprises, so they can actually reduce food loss and enhance the livelihood of the people as well, or the farmers as well, through innovations such as already brought in India, such as AgriStock, electronic national agriculture market, data-driven agriculture. India can actually guide other developing nations in meeting sustainable development goal number 2, which talks about zero hunger. Now, when we talk about the food security, it is very important to ensure food availability, food utilization, food stability, and food access as well. Right, so that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much.